Hi everyone, thanks for watching. If you enjoy our shows, please like our videos and subscribe to our channel. And you can support us by clicking onto our website, ageoftruth.tv.
Hello and welcome to this edition of Age of Truth TV. I'm Lucas Alexander in Copenhagen, Denmark. It's the 12th of October 2019, and our guest today is a Danish recording artist, author and researcher of the global power structure and spirituality. He's also a public, outspoken activist against the forced implementation of 5G. Dan Johannesson. Dan Johannesson joining us from his home on the Danish island Funen. Welcome to the show and thank you very much for being with us.
Well, thank you very much for having me. It's a pleasure to be here.
Before we get into topics like 5G and spirituality, please talk about the pyramid of power. You've been researching the global elite New World Order power structure for some time. But what is your view? What is your take on the New World Order? What is the New World Order all about?
Well, the New World Order to me, and I think to most people who research this topic, is first and foremost an advanced system of mass population control. It is a structure that is based on centralism, on making central structures connected to each other, just like a pyramid, which is usually the analogy we're using here. And within that structure, we have various unions, political unions, the European Union, the American, of course, society, which also is consisting of unions, a union of various states. And finally, we, of course, also have what is coming now, the Pacific Union, or Asian Union. Union is the correct term for it. And we are seeing also the rise of the African Union. And all of those unions are being connected politically. That is the one part of it. Centralization of power. That is a key component. They have been working with that for the last 30 years or so. Especially in Europe, we are sensing that very much. More and more power is getting away from the national governments and being given to super state-like systems within the union. So that's a political aspect. And then there is control of information flow on the other hand, which of course is the way to micromanage everything. And that is all about building an infrastructure that will enable the politicians and the people in power, and the real people in power, of course, which is behind them, which is usually various conglomerates. And then there are some ideas about even further powers, but let's wait with that. But their goal is to build this infrastructure that will enable them to control and gather all information about you and me and all of the populace, on at least in the Western world, and I suspect in the long run in the entire world. They're trying to gather information and control the flow of information, because whoever controls the flow of information in this world controls the population. Whoever controls the narrative, the stories we have been told about reality, controls the population's perception of reality. And once you control the perception, you actually control the consciousness of the person and the population. And through that, you can then control whatever they believe about the world. And that is true power.
Like mass mind control through the media and, well, elsewhere?
Yeah, exactly. And mass mind control, I remember growing up to that sometimes, the sci-fi movies, you know, and it was usually something being beamed into our heads, which actually the new 5G system are able to do, but I don't think they're going to do it in that way. It's been done very efficiently without that kind of invasive behavior. Usually they do mind control and all of that by using something I call within media science. I'm educated within media science. I have a master's degree in that. And I've coined a term there called cultural memes. And cultural memes is basically a simple collective idea, a simple idea package that is delivered to the population over and over again through various media sources.
And the educational system as well.
And definitely through the educational system. There are more complex sets of ideas, and then there are the very simple ones, which we actually use to achieve changes in the population's general perception about a given topic. A good example is the Iraq War a few years back in 2003, when they started to accelerate that concept and wanted to sell that to the population. They were using a very powerful cultural meme, which they called the War on Terror. If you break that down, it's a really simple narrative, actually. It's a good example of a cultural meme. That's why I mention it, because the War on Terror actually means something you cannot really argue against. Because if we should have a war at any kind, a war against terror seems fair and reasonable, because terror is a bad thing, right? Everybody within culture know that terror is a bad thing. So if we make a war against that, we already make ourselves and position ourselves as the good guys. And whatever we are warring within that huge rubber term of terror must be the bad guys. So it's a brilliant cultural meme, which is a very efficient box of controlling the human mind with these memes, these cultural memes that we then parrot to each other, and we end up holding each other within those logics that the media give us. We end up giving those, passing those on to each other afterwards, you know. And that's the power of memes. They sort of replicate themselves all of the time, and we end up holding ourselves in check.
You've also been researching political cover-ups and false flag attacks. But how do we actually know if it is a false flag attack? How do we know that it's not real? Or how do we suspect that it is orchestrated and manipulated by a power elite or a top elite faction of the government or the deep state military in order to create problem, reaction, solution, and possibly change the laws or enhance the control system?
What I'm using is what I call the Master Key of Discernment. And it is a key that can help you understand most facets of nature. And it is actually a Christian key. And the key is when Jesus said, "You shall know them by their fruits." And he talks very much about looking and understanding everything by its fruits. He talks about a corrupted tree versus a good tree and whatever fruits it gives. If you take that analogy and you apply that in order to discern things in this world, you can discern almost anything. So if you have that key with you, that master key, look at the fruits, meaning the end result of something. If you understand the fruits of anything as being the actual consequence, the actual response, the actual end result of any given topic, what actually comes out of any ideology, any human being, any policy, any media concept, always look at what comes out, what is the end result, because that is the fruit of the situation, whatever we talk about here.
So that is why they want to create a problem in order to get a reaction and then come up with a solution.
Absolutely, and it's exactly how it's done. And usually they're very aware of that. What they're actually doing is that you can say they plant a seed in the population. It's usually a bad seed. It's a deceptive seed. And then they know that seed will eventually spring up as a conscious form within the human population. And we will all start to act in a specific way, again, using the cultural memes, as I mentioned before. So when I see a false flag or something that I suspect being a false flag, I simply always ask myself, what is the most likely fruit of this situation, of this media story? And e.g., if you just look at the 9/11 attack, which of course was a massive impact on the human consciousness also, I remember even saw flickering images within my mind the second I saw it on TV, of war. I knew this, the fruits of this will lead to one result, one very obvious fruit, and it will be destruction and will be war. And of course, that came into fruition. So whenever I look at anything, I always ask myself, how will this affect the perception within the population? E.g., some while ago, we saw a cartoon drawer being killed in France. I think it was Charlie Hebdo. That scenario that story was used, of course, to gather all of the leaders in the European Union together on a huge peace march and stuff like that, showing that we were the victims and whoever did this was the bad guys. It was necessary because the ISIS conflict was not peaking anymore. We weren't that interested anymore, So whenever the public interest is declining, whenever we start to think something is becoming a bit boring, that's usually when they inject a new story into our perception, and so they can sort of buy a new lease for maybe half a year more, or 2 or more years of warring. They could then, after Charlie Hebdo, they could keep on having a wonderful war going, right? So.
But what do you think was the real issue with creating 9/11 if it was a false flag attack on the world, really? This changed the world.
First off, I'm not exactly sure it was an American government. I don't want to subscribe 100% to that. I think it's likely.
Who was it then?
I don't know yet. Some people say it was the Israeli government, etc. But I would prefer to more address your primary question. I think the primary reason for doing 9/11 was many things. In my view, it was the starting point of the New World Order. To me, it was like when you see the finish line and the starting line within a race. There's someone pulling the trigger on a gun and everybody starts running.
But heads of states, presidents, prime ministers, and financial top elite moguls and what have you, influencers, for many, many years have been talking about the New World Order, even back to the days of Hitler. And every time you saw somebody in a position of power, they actually publicly, even on television, talked about wanting to implement a New World Order. It's even on the American dollar bill. And in September 91, George H.W. Bush, father of George W. Bush, addressed the nation with a speech about the New World Order exactly 10 years before 9/11. So how come you're saying that you think it was the beginning of the New World Order?
It's a good question. I think it has been there, but it has been more hidden. They had been working through the unions, as we mentioned before, centralization, all of that. They've been working behind the scenes, but they needed to have an excuse for getting to the next phase, to the more obvious stage. And I think the 9/11 was the beginning of the more obvious stage, where they eventually, if you want to have a global dictatorship or something along those lines, eventually you will have to find a reasons to reduce civil rights. You will have to have a reason to reduce democracy within each democracy has to be cut down a bit, more and more and more, watered down, and you have to again to take over the civil rights, and you have to have an excuse to introduce more and more surveillance, more and more data gathering, more and more data control, information stream control. All of that you eventually have to do, and you have to introduce that to the population. So in 2000, also in September, a group called PANAC, the Project for a New American Century, had formed this document, which was basically outlining everything about what was supposed to happen after 9/11. And within that document, they also described that they would like to go to war with Iraq, for example. And they said that this cannot be done without a cataclysmic event along the lines of a new Pearl Harbor. So, and then exactly 12 months later, that came into fruition. And also the members of the White House at that time were almost all of the members also of PANAC, the Project for a New American Century. So to me, it was just simply a matter of implementing a plan and having to wait for that cataclysmic event. Whoever then made the event is another question, but the event came. And once that event came, they had the human populace, the consciousness of us all, exactly where they wanted it, in their palm, and could start moving on with the rest of the plan, which I outlined before, which had to do with information control and reducing civil rights and all of that.
But it is quite known that the American government, the American military, actually funded Al-Qaeda in the 80s through Brzezinski and other people who went to Afghanistan and Saudi Arabia.
The
Mujahideen, which later on then morphed into ISIS. But if the American government funded this group that they later claimed was behind the terror attacks on 9/11, why do you not think it was the government in America who was behind the attack?
I'm careful with saying very, very clear one-way things if I'm not quite sure, at least through own experience or through data sources or something. I have to have something which makes it very clear. I say the case that someone else than the actual alleged terrorist did it is very, very strong. The way the buildings collapsed, all of that. Everything leads to the fact that it was a controlled demolition going on. I have no doubt about that at all. In my mind, it is just a matter of using my rational mind, comparing a demolition that is controlled with the archived photos of 9/11. And when I compare those two, it's a controlled demolition. You can see it's obvious.
Especially also since Building 7, the third tower, collapsed as well in the same way and was not hit by a plane.
Yeah, that's of course a hilarious aspect of the entire story. That a few small fires allegedly was the cause for that entire steel structure to collapse. Of course, that's a joke, which many things around the 9/11 story is a joke. So I have no doubt that this was a planned operation, and it was not coming from the alleged terrorists. It was done with explosives. The only thing I don't feel like I have evidence yet to substantiate that it was the American government. I suspect it is because it fits so perfectly into what Payne had planned.
It depends a little bit on the end goal that you were talking about. The end goal, what was that when we talk about problem, reaction, solution?
Yeah, exactly. Who benefits? And of course, who benefited the most from this agenda was the entire elite behind the system. That was the people in power, whoever wanted those things about centralization and digital control, also about over the population. Those are the people who benefit.
So what about other false flag attacks? Can you mention some that you suspect also could be false flags and a covert operation?
Well, the one that comes to mind was the one I mentioned before, actually, with Charlie Hebdo. That was one of the times where I really thought there was something wrong with this. Maybe he was actually killed, most likely he was, but some people within the conspiracy environment say that sometimes these people tend to show up other places later on. There have been a few incidents also in America, some shootings and some, I cannot recall all of them. There have been a lot of them. And to be honest, I don't follow so much each of them anymore. But there have been a few incidents there too where I've seen the use of, crisis actors being used, which always, when I can see a YouTube video a few months later with bloopers almost, things that wasn't supposed to be there, but which were cut out, and I can see it was the exact same people who was in the image, or seeing recordings of crying dad to some shooting, laughing right before the camera goes on officially, and all of that. Whenever I see these things, I have a strong sense, wow, this is another false flag. And again, a false flag to me is just a part of the control system. It is the way to get these cultural memes out in a very powerful and emotional way that most people will react to. So they're used all of the time. they're used to control the mind and the perception of reality. And it's not always just false flags with killings. It's oftentimes just these huge stories where you use one or two or a few persons or a recurring theme that you keep on repeating over and over again, or showing that person again and again. And after a period of time, people start to believe whatever is conveyed and starts to buy into this cultural meme, this idea package, which is basically just a fancy word for propaganda. And we buy into that, and then we start following the politics or whatever it is that the powers that want to be are trying to convey to us, right?
Speaking of propaganda and mass propaganda at the moment, one of the most popular topics all over the world right now is climate change. Is that also part of a New World Order agenda, since it's been so heavily promoted?
Well, I'm pretty sure that most of it is. I would say about 80% of it is a matter of controlling the population. I think the motive behind all of that is, I know a lot of people will say Agenda 21 right now, Agenda 30 and stuff like that. And the vote is still out within me for that. But I'm starting to see more and more evidence that it is true, because there is coming more and more ideas about also preserving forests and stuff, which I find is beautiful and wonderful. But if you start moving us into the city areas and we can no longer live there, then I would say I'm sure of the Agenda 21 idea. But I think there are levels within this pyramid here of control. There are the ones who is in the top, and they are the one who may understand and have some concepts of where they want the world to go. That could be one world government, that could be Agenda 21 and stuff like that. I definitely think that there is an elite at the top orchestrating that. But below them are then the happy minions, basically the people who implement all of these ideas and structures based on completely different sets of ideas that they are spoon-fed. So they have no clue about some evil, sinister plan in the top. They really don't.
Because the information is compartmentalized.
Because the information is compartmentalized, exactly.
So a lot of people are doing good, but actually serving another agenda that they're not aware of. Is that what you're saying?
Absolutely. I think that's what's going on. Most people, they go to work, feeling I'm doing good stuff. I am implementing a new technology, or I'm doing this, I'm doing that, and this is good stuff. And this climate thing, it seems very real. And also, there's one other thing that needs to be addressed within all of that, and that is always the business aspect. We have to understand that we are living in a capital-driven reality. It's driven by control, various spiritual forces, and also very much, of course, by money, because that is a strong instrument of control.
So who benefits financially?
Yeah, who benefits, right? And this is a huge shift in a huge paradigm shift. All of what's going on now with the climate change and the Internet of Things, those two huge grand stories are able to shift the direction of planet Earth.
But why are the climate activists and the politicians promoting climate change, man-made climate change, that is, not natural climate change? Why don't they talk about the dangers of 5G and Internet of Things?
Well, again, the answer to both of those stories are the same to me at the top of it, of the surface at it at least, and that is money again. It's a matter of huge business. If we can get the entire populace in the Western world, all of the investors, all of the huge conglomerates, to at the same time to change their worldview and saying, okay, we need to make this gigantic industrial move away from the old ways, from fossil fuels and stuff. We need to invest in all of the new tech that is necessary. Then that's a gigantic financial adventure. The same thing is going on with the Internet of Things. Again, on the medium level. On the higher level, other things are going on with the Internet of Things. But in the medium level, where most people are within the system, it's a matter of, it's a great idea. We can get faster movies, and it's a huge, huge, huge financial adventure. I saw a business page Ordinary Business webpage recently talking about that only next year, they expect a revenue at $27 trillion. And this can be Googled, $27 trillion on the Internet of Things. So this is even, it's in the size and order of wars or even more. So that's the primary motivator, I think, obviously, as it always is with these grand stories. It's about the cash, it's about the money, it's about making billions of people having one distinct perception that leads us all to accept something we would not otherwise accept.
So that is why the climate activists do not talk about the Internet of Things and 5G, but they do talk about saving the planet because of, well, man-made climate change. But many scientists say that it is not man-made, that CO2 is not the problem, and they're not being allowed to speak in the mainstream media. But in fact, they say it's ongoing natural climate changes that happens all the time.
If I should be the one saying what is the absolute truth on either of those two positions, I would have a hard time because there are so many studies within this area. I myself can only say my subjective opinion about that, and that is that they might be right, and they might be partly right, and most likely, I think many times these things are half truths blended with half lies. You know, many of these huge stories have some truth to it and some lies to it, and we should not be blind that many of the studies on the critical side, skeptics, as they call the climate skeptics, many of those studies are financed by the oil industry. They have been financing studies like that for many years, and everyone can buy a scientist or 100 scientists and to sound really serious if their amount is high enough.
Financed by the oil industry, you say?
Yeah, listen, I'm not saying that is the truth. I'm just saying that could be part of the truth. Some of them can be financed, and the same thing applies to the climate alarmist. You know, the one who says it's real. Both sides have this issue, and that's the issue we have today with truth, is that truths are bought in many cases. So you will have to use your own common sense, and again, use the Master Key to Discernment, which is whatever the fruits of whatever we are talking about. So to me, it is this story about climate is most likely half right in both places. I believe that much of this could be very well a consequence of natural events on planet Earth, naturally occurring events. Because the planets have been changing and have gone through heat periods and cold periods many times before in history. So I have no objections against that. It sounds very plausible. On the other hand, I don't want to, color code or pretend like we are not emitting extreme amounts in the industrial age of CO2, because we are. That can be measured, and we know that. It's been measured for many years. We know there's an extreme release of CO2 in the atmosphere. And any rational being must also admit that can have implication on the biosphere. Whenever something radical is taking place within the biosphere, we have to consider the possibility of it affecting the biosphere.
But what about chemtrails, for example? What are your thoughts on that?
Sure, chemtrails do have an effect. All of this have an effect. The CO2 have an effect. The chemtrails have an effect, and that's a trick within all of this to figure out what is what here. Who is doing what? What is responsible for what? How much is man-made emissions? How much is chemtrails? How much is the HARP program altering the composition of the biosphere, the electric field around the world? What is what? And that is the huge trick of these people, these psychopaths behind the whole thing. That is that they are able to keep us all confused because many things are going on all at once, all at the same time.
But it has to do with control then, problem, reaction, solution?
I absolutely agree. That is if you, a good, wonderful free thinker named Max Weber, he once said, if you want to understand this world, you have to try to stop looking at the rabbit holes. He said, forget about planet X and all of that. Forget about that. Look at what is actually really taking place again and again and seems to have a clear direction. And then he talked about centralization of power. And he talked about he's also talking about toxins and all of that. And if you look at those things, then a pattern do emerge, which is verifiable. And that is the kind of patterns that I'm most interested in. The ones where we can see there's a clear direction, there's a clear goal, and there are consistent repeating behavior behind this. E.g., we keep on seeing this story about climate change. We keep on seeing strange clouds in the sky.
The white stripes, you mean? Chemtrails.
That's what I mean when I say weird clouds. But
people call them contrails. But do you think that they are chemtrails and done on purpose?
Well, I think it's the most likely answer is that, yeah, chemtrails are real. I also think that under certain weather conditions, contrails can stick around for a while. But the way that they spread out and the way that they come out, I think most of that, when we see a trail spread out like that and become like a thin cloud laying around for hours, that to me is definitely chemtrails.
Because a contrail disappears very fast.
Usually within a few minutes. If you listen to some of the videos, testimonies from pilots, yeah, usually normal contrails dissipate quite quickly. So to me, there's no doubt. And all of these things are connected, again, also with the information control. All of these things are binding itself together to sort of a web that is enclosing us all, right? We're enclosed within the sky. Things are falling in a grid-like fashion even, it's amazing. And within the media, we are controlled through memes. And within the Internet of Things that is being rolled out now, we're going to control ourselves and being controlled by handing over all the rest of our privacy and data to the big industries and whoever would like to control us.
So some people say, especially these days, we are in October 2019, they suspect or ask questions at least about who this young teenage Swedish girl, Greta Thunberg, who she really is, being promoted in this international way, and she is now up for the Nobel Peace Prize. Do you think she's aware of this whole problem, if it is orchestrated from within and they are using her for talking publicly, as some people say, or is she unaware and really fighting for her cause?
I think that Greta herself is more or less in a situation where she, of course, as a person, the easiest way to get Greta on board is to simply make her believe this. But, it doesn't have to be advanced. You don't have to threaten anyone. Just make her believe that this is true and that whatever she is speaking is the final and the only truth about this, that this is a 100% man-made issue and it needs to be addressed by us changing everything within society as fast as we can. I think that is what she believes, and it's not hard to make her believe that, because that is what the established scientists are saying and been saying for 30 years. So I think she's just basically, I think she's pretty smart within the context of being 13, 14 years old,
She's 16, isn't she?
She's 16 now. Okay. Wow, she's been around for that long. Wasn't she 13 when she started? I haven't been following along within about her age, to be honest, because she just keep on running around in the background of the media landscape, right?
The foreground, you mean? These days she's on the front page news.
Yeah, now it's a foreground, but for me it's a background, because I have a tendency to face these things out, these stories out quite quickly. So I'm sorry, but of course it's in the foreground, and when you look at the media landscape, she's everywhere. But the answer is, I think that she believes this story with all her heart and all her mind. And I think she might be partly right. I think there is an adjustment needed in human behavior. I think that we should take it serious whenever we release such amount of any gas within the atmosphere. On the other hand, I just want to balance it out and saying, I'm not sure it's that bad. I'm not sure it's that alarming. And I also think, from a media standpoint, that you should have the skeptics in the debate always to balance things out.
But they're not.
But they're not.
Why do you think that is?
It's the same thing as with the 5G case, where also a lot of people are independent researchers are trying to get into the media, explaining everyone that this is a dangerous thing and has a lot of side effects. It's again a matter of controlling the narrative. Everything in this world, especially the mediated world, is about controlling the narrative, and that is not even controversial. Media scientist named David Alfheid have written extensively about that. He says that social control is something that media has because of their ability to define the situation. Whoever defines the situation, what is right and what is wrong, define the perception. And whoever defines the perception of the population defines the world. So this is a matter of controlling the narrative. It's always a matter of controlling the narrative. And the narrative will always, especially the last 10 years, is becoming extreme now, will always benefit the business side of this world. And business will always be elevated from now on and out, will always be elevated over public health concerns, environmental effects, etc. Because there has come these huge free trade agreements now, like CETA, which actually puts the governments under the conglomerates' control through something called the ISDS element, which is a law that makes it possible for the conglomerates to sue the national states if they have any law in place that can stop the profiteering on the given market. So that's what it's all about. It's all controlling the narrative, controlling the population, controlling the perspective.
So do you think that is also true for, let's just say, natural health medicine when we talk about the pharmaceutical industry and chemical medicine, really? Why don't we use natural herbal medicine as well, which was used for many years in Asia and probably all over the world?
Yeah, I think that's a brilliant example. And that is, again, a classical example of where the huge conglomerates profits on something. Of course, you should not be blind that the herbal medicine, and especially the ones making, pills, alternative pills and all of that within the alternative health arena, that too has become a pretty big industry. But it's nothing like the petrol-based pharmaceutical industry, which is gigantic. It's much bigger. So yeah, there's no debate in my mind there that the big pharmaceutical companies are having a lot of lobbyists in place to control the narrative in their favor all of the time, and of course to obliterate any alternative solutions. So that's another classical example of how those with the money has also nowadays more and more the power over the narrative, and through that the power over the population.
You are part of the so-called truth community, the truth movement, when you're speaking about these controversial topics. But how do you view the truth community? Why are there so much internal fighting and conflict within the different factions of awareness and enlightenment communities, and of course what is called truthing, when researching and exposing these conspiracy facts and or theories?
Yeah, well, I think there are several reasons. One of them is what I call sort of there's a bit of imbalance within the movement sometimes, where we are very quick, not everybody, but sometimes I think that people are a bit quick to say what the truth is, and that is part of it. But I say that the infight within the truth movement also has to do with one thing that we don't like to talk about, I think, within the community, which is that the truth environment can be a fast ticket to a bit of fame.
Fame?
Yeah. Some figures within this environment have the ability to, if they want to, they can get a taste of getting a few followers, and through that let's say if I want to have success with whatever my version of the story is, then and someone else comes along with a completely different version of the story, then I might be inclined to go after that person and say that what he's saying is completely fake, or what she's saying is completely a lie, and stuff like that. And that to me, that's part of the explanation of the infight. There's another part too. I wouldn't be surprised if there's a few placed agents here too, because the powers that be is very aware of all of these things, what's going on. They are very aware of the truth environment, and I wouldn't be surprised if once in a while there is someone who is on the CIA's funding or another funding list. And of course, if they can create division or make us talk about things that doesn't really matter, like Nibiru or Planet X, which to me is less important than a fascist society being introduced in front of our very eyes. If they can do that, if they can divert the discussions, then they can control the discussions within the free thinkers environment. And I think that's also a big part of it.
But if this new world order power elite structure that you've been talking about is connected to a so-called alien agenda, an off-planet agenda, what are your thoughts on that? What is your take on the whole alien extraterrestrial idea and the theory and maybe facts that we are being visited by beings from other planets, and aliens may be here and of course on other planetary systems? What is your take on that?
Well, I think to me it's one of those areas where I have no definite answer. I have to moderate it, as you notice I sometimes do. It's because I haven't met an alien yet. I haven't met one yet. I haven't seen one in real life.
Maybe we are all aliens from other planets.
Maybe we are all aliens. Lip. And now you should say something along those lines, and then we're from the same planet. No, I'm just kidding. The thing is here that I think it's highly likely. Again, it's most likely that aliens are real. I've seen so many recordings now, which doesn't seem to be computer-generated graphics, which seems legit.
Do you think that we are alone in the universe on planet Earth?
No, if the theory, which appear to be sort of proven, that we are actually living in a real universe with actual stars and planets, then I'm absolutely sure that life has, of course, evolved on other planets. And I don't think we're alone. But what is visiting us, that is where I'm a bit more careful in my answer, because there could be several reasons. There are also a lot of people talking about interdimensional entities visiting us, right?
Like archons, which the Christians call demons, which the Muslims call the jinn?
Yeah, exactly. They have definitely some of the traits on that, the ability to appear as they want, and also appearing as light beings. And we always talk about, within these environments, like very often light being is something positive, but it's not necessarily positive, because e.g. in the Bible they described Lucifer as a light being too, the false light, right? So we have to be careful with that.
Appearing as angels.
Appearing as angels, exactly. And it is the ultimate deception, is to make everything look beautiful and dandy and beautiful this and beautiful that, but maybe there's a cynical agenda behind it. And to me, again, that is where I use the Master Key. I always ask myself, what is the fruit of this? What is the fruit of e.g. talking about aliens? What is the fruit of this? And to me, since we are not being visited, and since we are not, according to my knowledge, in direct contact with them, at least in the mainstream world, I think we are behind the scenes. But since we're not in the mainstream world, their direct fruits to me is unclear. What is the fruit of them here, except for a lot of confusion.
But they're trying not to talk about it. The government doesn't want to reveal this hidden secret. They say that aliens are visiting us, planet Earth, and they are all over the universe. And many researchers in this field of truth research and conspiracy research, they're talking about alien factions or alien beings working with our government.
Yeah, I know about those stories. Of course, I've researched that too, about especially the Greys and the reptilians too. But one of the first I read about, at least, that we should have been directly working together with, collaborating with, should have been the Greys. I then later on read that reptilians seems to be having some controlling aspect towards over the Greys and stuff like that. At least a theory along those lines. But again, of course, the problem with the entire alien debate and discussion is that the informations are vague, or flickering images and testimonials. That does not mean that it's not true. I think it's most likely that we have made contact. I think it's most likely that if we have made contact, because of the consciousness state in the human consciousness around the 1940s, where allegedly maybe the first contact took place, because of our state of consciousness, which was fear-driven, we would have been contacting the kind of species who would tell us about technology, who would give us a weapon technology, who would share various maybe microchip technology and stuff like that. So I find it likely that we are most likely dealing with the crappy guys primarily. That's so Earth-like, right? We always go to the one with the quick fix and the fast power, instead of the ones who may have a more benevolent agenda. So I think we are most likely, if we're working with someone, it wouldn't surprise me if it's guys like the Grey and the reptilians and stuff like that. If they're real, I always like to have a little door open for what if it isn't true. But again, the evidence to me is overwhelming that it's most likely very factual, and we are working with these guys.
But being a so-called truther and interested in truth, what is the truth then? You've also recently become a Christian, being a former New Ager. That is what you have called it yourself. How does truth go hand in hand with becoming a Christian and being part of that Christian belief, organized religion, and the church?
Yeah. First of all, I think it's important to mention that there is a distinction, at least in my soul, between organized religion and being a follower of Jesus Christ. To me, Jesus Christ have been used and abused in a million ways of people in power. Also, we should talk a bit about, just briefly, what I think when I talk about Christianity, because Christianity is a broad term, and most people are talking about that would look at e.g. the Catholic Church. With the Catholic Church, it's a perversion of that. It's a satanic church using satanic symbols all over their grounds. Whenever you visit them, there are satanic symbols everywhere. The church have been hijacked. The words of Jesus have been hijacked, used and misused endlessly through the story of man. I'm not interested in that as my spiritual foundation. I just recognize that has been going on. It has been hijacked, and the word of Jesus Christ and the words of the Gospels have been used and misused in a 1,000 ways.
So you believe that Jesus was a real man walking the earth with the message that you can read in the Bible?
Yeah, actually, I believe that Jesus Christ was who he said he was. The way, the truth, and the life.
You believe he was the son of God? A man, an older man with a gray beard on a cloud?
No. Listen, that's a common misconception also. A man with a beard called God. What? No, the Bible is very clear on that. God is spirit. That is, he's not physical at all.
But aren't we all part of spirit? We all have a soul, I suppose?
Absolutely, everybody is spirit. And that is also mentioned very clearly in the Bible. Everybody has a component of spirit. We are spirit, soul, and body. And within that, of course, also our mind.
But why is that your truth, then? Being a former so-called New Ager, or at least into the spiritual, the more esoteric spirituality.
Yeah. Well, it became my truth because I was in the New Age environment for 30 years. And actually, there are 3 causes that it became my truth. Why Jesus Christ and receiving the Holy Spirit and following the words of Jesus and the principles that he had outlined, why that became my truth. First of all, my research and my experiences within the New Age environment led me to that conclusion. The second reason was that I observed and I compared the fruits of Christianity with the fruits of New Age philosophies. And the third and last one was a spiritual thing, where I received the Holy Spirit into my life after coming to faith in Jesus Christ, which was a deeply spiritual experience.
How did you receive the Holy Spirit?
Well, there is only one clear way to do that, and that is once you really come to faith in Jesus Christ, you receive the Holy Spirit as a gift. It's mentioned a few times in the Bible. You simply receive the Holy Spirit as a gift that intercedes, connects with your spirit, and through that connects you to the God Spirit too. So that comes when you utter with words that you believe that Jesus Christ died on the cross for your sins, and he took to the realm of the dead, and after 3 days was raised with the power of God.
And do you believe that?
Yeah, and you utter that with your mouth. If you utter these things with your mouth, then you receive the Holy Spirit, if you utter them from an honest and true heart, and you can feel it immediately.
But you were just talking about mass mind control and how we are being exposed to propaganda through political initiatives and through the educational system. But how about religion? Isn't that the most profound and the strongest weapon against the human mind, keeping people in fear of an all-powerful God and talking about yourself as a sinner?
Well, religion in itself actually comes from the Greek, I think it's a Latin word, religare, which means to bind. So yeah, religion in itself has a lot of issues. Religion is when you try to tie yourself into a very limited perspective on reality.
But if you believe that, then you will also give your power away, thinking that somebody died for your sins.
It depends on how you look at these things, because I'm not a 110% follower of the religion itself. I'm a follower of Jesus Christ. So it's not the same thing. When I look at the Christian religion, what I look at also when I look at the commandments and stuff like that, I constantly ask myself the same question through all of it. What are the fruits of doing this? What is the fruits of creating a Christian country, for example? We've done that 4 or 5 times here in Scandinavia. We are the richest countries in the world, some of the richest countries in the world. We are the only countries in the world, these Christian countries, built on Christian values, are the only countries in the world for many years with a functioning welfare society. That's the fruit of Christianity in a cultural scene. What is the fruit then of following Jesus Christ as a person? Well, the fruits are inner peace, inner joy, happiness, and long-suffering, and understanding that you have to help your fellow man, and you have to connect and love God, love your fellow man, and love yourself.
But that is what all religions talk about, Buddhism and you name it, and also part of the, let's just call it esoteric spirituality or New Age groups.
I agree, they all promise that, but the difference is who delivers. Who delivers? Which one of these faiths?
They all think they all deliver.
Yeah, they all think they all deliver, but...
So why is one thing better than the other?
Because of the fruits. Because, as I mentioned before, I cannot answer for the Buddhist religion. I haven't dwelled into that, so I cannot answer that. I can compare with what I've done before, which was the New Age environment, right? And within the New Age environment, what I saw there through 30 years, I was really into it. I cleansed my chakras, I meditated, I raised my vibration. I had a channel named the Lightworkers Lounge where I made videos about light work. I firmly believed in the ascension. All of it was really, really into it for 30 years. But I kept on noticing the fruits of it from everyone I met within the environment. I worked as a clairvoyant for 3 years. In the weekends, I took out on the Mystique fairs here in Denmark. And I sat there and gave 25 clairvoyances sometimes in a day, for 20 minutes clairvoyance, 20 minutes there, 20 minutes there.
But you can't just turn something like that off if you have the ability, can you?
Well, after I received the Holy Spirit, those gifts have become much, much, much less, or curses, if you will.
Is that because your mind has been, or your soul has been
It's because
hijacked?
the Holy Spirit does what it promises in the Bible, which is to rebuild and restructure you inside.
So the fruit you harvest from being a Christian is a stronger sense of security within yourself.
I would say that's one of the fruits. There are many fruits. What I saw the fruits were in the New Age, which to me was when most of the people I met there, not all of them, let's be clear, but many of them, what happened is in the beginning, it's like a drug. It feels really, really good. You gain more and more insight. I did too. You begin to gain abilities. You start to open up and you start to feel more and more. You also start to feel more anxious and usually more depressed along the way. What also happens is that the mind seems to, the longer time, for every decade I was there, the mind seems to be trying to splinter itself, atomize itself into more and more small parts, because you had to look into, you had to be aware of so many things. You had to be aware of how you thought, what kind of vibration you were in, what kind of food you ate, how you were with other people, sensing their energetic field, having guardian angels, all of that while you are in an ordinary, trying to survive an ordinary life too. So you had to sort of juggle 2 or 3 realities within yourself at the same time.
Because it's personal evolvement, and you don't have to do that now if you have to follow let's just say, a narrative.
You can say that, and that I would have said it, I would have coined it the similar way, I think.
But aren't you giving your power away then?
No, not at all. Because it's a matter of something that I didn't understand. At least for me, it's a matter of this. That is that it's not about power or not power to me. It's about recognizing a key question, the answer to a key question. Was God real to me, and what is God? Now, if the God can be many things to many people, but within the New Age, it's usually sort of an energy blob. It's an energy consciousness. It has no real agenda for you. And if it has, maybe it's conveyed to you through a spirit guide or something. But otherwise, it doesn't actually really care that much about you. There's no real connection. It's just like a cash machine. If you do like this and do like that, then you vibrate in a specific way. You get the car, you get the girl, you get the job. That is basically how it's viewed sometimes within the law of attraction environment too. What I had a hard time doing leaving New Age was the idea of recognizing that I am a human. I am a human spirit. I am not a God spirit. I'm created by God, yes, but I am not supposed to be God myself. I am supposed to be a human being having a human experience. And I became aware, to my experience, that there is a God, and that God has an idea and has a plan for you and for me and for everyone, according to my belief system.
So is it God's plan that we're supposed to live on an earth full of terror and wars and crime and all of the things we've been talking about?
Well, that is, of course, where Satan comes into the picture, the satanic energies. And that was also part of what helped me arrive at this decision, was that everywhere I looked, satanic Luciferian doctrine was being preached and implemented. Everywhere I looked, I saw the all-seeing eye and all of these satanic and Luciferian symbols everywhere, in entertainment shows, the pyramid structure, the all-seeing eyes. It was everywhere.
So how can this happen? How can this take place if there is an all-powerful God who wants the best and who gives you and many other people security?
Well, basically, that is explained in the Bible too.
But if you have to explain it.
Yeah, it's the same. It would be a similar answer because it makes more sense than anyone I arrived at. But But basically, it is to understand that Satan, the satanic force, is on a leash. On a leash. That's also why people are saying, well, it's a dualistic religion. Christianity is dualistic and stuff. No, it's not dualistic at all, because there is one God who is a ruler about the entire shop here, the entire universe. One God who rules everything, and He has allowed the satanic energies to be here. It is clearly also stated a few times in the Bible that Satan has to come to God and ask permission before he do various things.
So God allows Satan to operate here.
Yeah.
How can that be? Why?
Again, this is my guess, because you would have to ask God to be sure, right? And I'm not him.
Right now I'm asking you because you changed your views and we want to hear your perspective.
Yeah. So the question was why I think he's allowing him to run around, right? Roam free. It's more or less free, on a leash. And I think the reason is we have to have what you can call contrasting experiences. We have to have some contrast in order to understand that you belong to a larger system and you want to be part of some larger system. You also have to understand what this system is not. If you want to be part of God's kingdom and God's the life of God and the life He has planned for you and the kingdom that He has, you have to be aware of an alternative options also. You have to understand the contrast that is also available in life, because free will is given to us by God also. We have free will. So by giving us a choice, a set of choices, other choices that we can experience, we have the chance to experience what is right and what is wrong in our life, and through that make more profound, more precise choices about our life. So that's why I think He'll allow him to roam free, in order for us to understand what is right and wrong in this world.
Let's get on to the topic of 5G, because you have been publicly speaking out against the implementation and rollout of 5G. Why do you think that 5G is such a hot topic at the moment?
Well, actually, I feel like it's a hot topic within the truth environment, and I'm really grateful, because this is one place where the truth environment got it absolutely right, in my view at least, because there is a lot of substantial research being done by independent researchers, and they keep on concluding that the electromagnetic frequencies emitting from all of these cell towers and through all of our gadgets is very harmful and detrimental to human health, plant life, etc. So I think it's basically because the truth environment, thank God, I would like to say almost, we are really quick to pick up what is going on. We're really quick to sense, could this be part of the new order? What is it? What is going on? We're very aware about environmental toxins and stuff like that too. So I think this is one of the many times actually where the truth environment worked perfectly, and we managed to sound the alarms, and with good cause, because all independent research shows that this is a huge problem, and I'm so grateful for the truth environment. This is really where we show our worth when it comes to that. I would much rather we work with these kind of things, because we could change the world, and then they let Planet X wait for a while,
But many scientists, at least those who are allowed to speak in the mainstream media, they claim that there are no danger whatsoever to the implementation and rollout of 5G in terms of the electromagnetic radiation coming from 5G.
Yeah. And what's interesting about that's something I have researched quite a bit also. In Denmark, we have two experts they use very much here. And I see a similar pattern in many European countries. There's a few experts here and there, which usually are the ones who's counseling the government about all of this. And they also tend to be the same guy in Denmark that counsels the government. It's the same guy that also counsels the cancer. Yeah, I don't know what the word is for it. An NGO kind of things here, which is supposed to protect us against cancer, right? And he is also counseling them. which is called Kræftens Bekæmpelse here in Denmark, the fight against cancer. We have that organization here. That was the word I was looking for. And he is feeding them information to the same guy. And then there's another guy. And both of those two guys have one thing in common, and that is that all of the research is paid by the telecom industry. So they're on the payroll.
And they're advising the health ministry, and they are speaking to the politicians, and the politicians believe them. Is that how it is?
Exactly. And they are paid by the telecom industry. So it's a funny thing, right? Because if you compare this, the telecom industry paying the experts that the entire policy is being based by in Denmark, if you did the exact same thing, let's just say with tobacco, right? The smoking industry, the cigarette industry, I wondered how the media would react if we used two experts from House of Prince, which is a huge tobacco company in Scandinavia. What if you took two experts from House of Prince, and put them in the counseling position of the government, being the expert on smoking here in Denmark, and it's based on their recommendations that we unfold an entire policy? Wow.
It's quite clever, huh?
It's quite clever, and it's also mad. How can this be? It's absurd. I understand the confusion about all, because people hear that this is experts, but the media rarely makes it clear to them that these experts are actually paid by the industry. That means they have a conflict of interest, and that's why they cannot be trusted at all, of course. They're taking money from the very industry that they're trying to be objective towards.
But 5G is being rolled out at rapid speed all over the world. But in Denmark, we have a lot of parties on both sides of the party lines, on the left and the right. And all of them voted yes to the implementation of 5G just in Denmark. And this is happening all over the world. Why do you think they're rolling it out this fast? And why do you think all of the politicians said yes to it?
I think that the reason why they said yes is financial reasons primarily, but also it was a part of huge agreement we made here in Denmark. And the lines about 5G was about one line put in there randomly. And that is how they do this sometimes. That is also why I do not always believe that all of the politicians are in on it, because most of them are actually more or less normal human beings. Maybe not all of them, but most of them are, And it's just a little line in a huge text. Blah, 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 blah. We're going to get that. We're going to do this, that. And by the way, we're going to make a new generation of the mobile internet named 5G. Moving on to the next sentence. It's just that. So I must admit that in this case, I don't think it was in bad will in that way.
But it was lack of research?
Lack of research and a cleverness again from the industry behind. The conglomerates really do have and a skill for being really clever of getting their will done, right? And so by just having one little line in there about, by the way, something about 5G and moving on to other topics, that's extremely clever, because most politicians just say, well, we have 4G, now comes to 5G, okay, nothing about health precautions, nothing about that. Let's sign it, fine, of course we're going to the next generation, as we always do within technology, right? So I don't think it was ill will. The other part of the question was about why it should be implemented this fast. And to me, it has to do with the fact that, again, remember we talked about the pyramid earlier, where there's the people who actually know stuff in the middle, and then there's other people below
Compartmentalization.
Compartmentalization, exactly. And I think that the people in the higher hierarchies are very aware and can see already now that the population is not really that comfortable about 5G. They want it out now, they want it out quickly, and they want it out quickly because it's an essential part of the new world order. To me, that's the the only explanation.
In order to do what? What is the fruit, as you call it, of implementing 5G?
The fruits of implementing 5G is, of course, the wet dream of the elite. It's the wet dream of whatever the cabal's name is at the top. Because once a 5G comes out into the world, what you have is the infrastructure for the Internet of Things, which means that you can finally hook up every single thing, every single gadget, every single carton of milk, every single pull you do on the toilet when you flush your toilet. Everything can finally be measured. They made sensors now that you can put in the bed with your children, and they can sense the breath of your children. They have algorithms that can calculate how your child's if your child is crying or is hungry. The algorithm can calculate by its sounds if it's crying or if it's hungry, if it's sad, or if it's something, if it pissed its pants. All of that it can calculate.
But can they also measure that through smart meters, which is mandatory in Denmark to have rigged up inside of your homes?
Well, there's a little distinction there between smart meters and then the small sensors, the Internet of Things sensors. Internet of Things sensors comes in all forms, and all sorts of small devices, things you can tape to the wall or tape to the bed or plug on the bed. That's one thing. That is usually sensors that collect data about behavior and all sorts of things, temperature in the room when the baby's crying and all that. But then you have the smart meters that you mentioned there, which is basically only there officially, of course, to collect the data of your energy consumption within the house. But it has another issue to it. I think it's only collecting that. It is truly only collecting your energy consumption in your house when it's rising, when it's falling, and all of that. But the problem with smart meters is the way they do that, which is that they emit the EMF field around them, which is they're pulsing out electromagnetic frequencies whenever they are contacting the server outside somewhere, or the antennas, which then leads to the server, right?
Wireless radiation.
Wireless radiation, exactly.
And a different level of frequencies as well, right?
Yeah, there are different frequencies within the EMF range, which affects us in various ways. And the new thing which comes with 5G is that they're starting to use new frequencies that they haven't been using earlier on. For example, they want to, I think it's around next year, they want to implement something called 26 gigahertz in Denmark, which is within the microwave range. And there's a lot of problems and issues with that. First of all, we have never done that in human history before. There is no clue how it affects the human life, the plant life, the animal life on Earth. They really don't know. The ones who do know are the alternative independent researchers who have actually made studies and keep on finding really troublesome effects of that.
But also many highly esteemed professors and people who've been working in the field for a long time, possibly retired now, talking about it, but their voice cannot be heard on the mainstream news about this.
Exactly, that is what they have done many times. That's also what they did to me. I tried to talk about this on my little Facebook channel and made a video about it, and that video went viral, so a lot of people started to discussing this for the first time in Denmark, meaning that finally the media had to wanted to attack me to make this thing go away. And the way they did that was they took the paid scientists and they put them in 2/3 of the articles they wrote about me trying to warn about 5G. They took these two scientists, which was paid by the industry. Of course, they did not tell that they were paid. And then they used them to try to pull apart every claim I made. What they did not do was to put those two scientists in contact with the other real scientists. I'm no scientist, I never claimed to be. Why did they not just contact the independent researchers instead?
And there's about 230 different scientists who have actually spoken out, and that's on record.
Yeah, absolutely. There's this huge thing called the 5G appeal, which is a collection of scientists from more than 40 countries, as you say, more than 230 scientists and doctors, very esteemed. Some of them haven't had really high places also within the World Health Organization. And they simply don't phone them. They don't call them up, Instead, they take a civilian like me and they tear me apart in the eye of the public to try to shut up this entire story. Thank God it seemed that it backfired on them, and more voices came in.
But why do you think you got this kind of exposure?
Well, I guess the official reason is, of course, that I was just lucky. My message somehow came at the right time. I did it the very night that the government in Denmark had announced this, because I've been following that. I knew that 5G was on the way. And I clearly remember that in the radio, I heard them talk about, now comes 5G. The government has just approved it. It's done. It's signed and it's out next year. And I was waiting for the journalist to say something critical about, okay, now we come these microwave frequencies and much more exposure to EMF than ever before in human history. What about the health precautions? I was waiting for some guy to take the microphone and ask that question and stuff, and it never came. Well, the only thing that came was, celebration of the benefits of the technology that followed along with all of that.
So what are the possible dangers and health effects of electromagnetic radiation and frequencies?
Well, it's a long list, but some of them is, of course, almost all of the studies that has been done, and it's hundreds now, show that within rats and mouse, the glycomas, which is the precursor to cancer, and cancer arises in their bodies, usually in the heart, but sometimes other places too. There is also many other effects, e.g. cognitive disorders, many issues resembling having stress, many issues such as the membranes and the cell that we use all of the time, that we consist of. The cell membranes becomes thinner and more dysfunctional. And that allows for something to penetrate the cell. I'm not a biologist, but that's what I understand, that it penetrates the cell and makes it even more unstable. So there are many things: headaches, cognitive issues, having trouble sleeping, restlessness, having trouble concentrating on issues, all sorts of consequences in the soft end, and then ranging all the way to more and more physical disabilities, all sorts of weird pains and aches, and cancer. And of course, in the end, if you have that long enough, you die, right? So it's a really serious thing, and we have to address it. And I'm so grateful that the free thinkers have done so.
Do you think that 5G can also be used for some kind of mind control?
Well, even the New York Times recently have brought an article about that topic, actually, where workers on the Cuban embassy, American workers in the embassy in Cuba, was on record for saying that they had been tampered with, their bodies and their mind, through what they call microwave weapons, which is, of course, microwave. That is what EMF is all about, and 5G is able to transmit. And they had many of the same issues that I mentioned here, and some of them have never been able to resume work after those attacks. So actually, even the New York Times admits it, and they're so kind that they have brought a link within that article where you can go to the DARPA papers, which is DARPA showing, yes, this technology does exist, and these documents are real, and it is out there, and even New York Times have referenced them in mainstream media. So it's kind of pretty solid, I would say.
It's very similar to DO, right? Which is directed energy weapons.
Yeah, direct energy weapons is, again, of course, a matter of frequencies and waves intermingling with matter. And where I would say that the first category we talked about before has the ability to go in and the way it works is to go into your brain and start resonating in there. It started to make resonance that makes your ear and your brain pick it up as sound. There is no sound at all, but your brain picks it up as sound, and through that you can say, whoa, yeah, all sort of spooky things, right? That's one way of it. Energy-directed weapons, to my understanding, functions a little differently, but of course it's still within a matter of understanding frequencies and range, just like Tesla always said was the key to understanding the world, right? And through that they can concentrate and focus these vibrations to a spot and make the mass and energy change that massively heated up, for example, so that buildings evaporate almost immediately. So it can be used in a plethora of ways. And it's a little sad and scary that we reach that point now where we have that much understanding of energy, and the only thing we can come up with is using it for weaponization.
Many researchers claim that 5G is actually connected to AI, artificial intelligence. What are your thoughts on that?
I think that's a most likely and plausible explanation I could come up with too. I heard it a few times. Even Elon Musk has said that that is sort of the next phase, that all of this data, which will be collected through the Internet of Things, is supposed to go into sort of a huge database. And also right now we're talking about collecting data, us people sending data into something. But from there on, and being able to transmit data back into our systems, e.g. through the microchips that they're implanting, it's a small leap. It's not that big, because if you have an advanced microchips that can go and direct with your contact with your nervous system within your body, and people start to send data back the other way, then suddenly you are Republican, and a Republican instead of a Democrat. It's that easy.
Creating this smart grid around Earth so that all areas are covered with these frequencies.
Yeah, and that's a brilliancy of it, because if you establish it as on a global level, and maybe in 10, 15 years time, also make sure that we are connected in a way so we can receive signals. That's the power. That's a true, absolute power. That is when we can receive the signals, not just on a pair of goggles you can take on and off, which will also, of course, alter your mind and your patterns, just like the phones already are doing now. But if it's operated into your skin and connected with your nervous system, that is the final power, or even with your brain. I know now that Elon Musk, he has made this Neuralink. You can just look it up on YouTube. And he talks about that the level they're going with that is they're about to be able to inject a fluid matter into your brain. And once that is in your brain will be able to instantly connect with any computer device around you, meaning you can connect and be part of yourself, the internet. I think that is some of the final stages, because then you can fill your mind with any images you want, from happy clowns to the worst nightmare you can ever imagine. Then you have total, absolute control of the population, even on the thought level. And I think that's the end station for this.
And then all free will has disappeared, vanished.
Yeah. And basically we are, it's also mentioned in the Bible that this is the time where we get the mark of the beast, which says you cannot pay or travel anything without the mark of the beast. That is written more than 2,000 years ago. You cannot travel, you cannot pay or anything without the mark of the beast. That is where we are going. Total control, total surrender to the most satanic of all agendas, which is to obliterate the spirit of the human being.
So is there any way, any possibility at all to shield yourself from 5G radiation?
Well, there are various technical things you can do. Right now, there are various types of paint out there. It's a bit expensive, but it consists of some small metallic particles. And once you paint your house with it and follow a few other guidelines, you can make your own house into what is called a Faraday cage. And the Faraday cage is basically protecting you from radiation from outside your house coming into your house. But I hope that we'll not have to come to that. There's also various clothes you can buy, extremely expensive, that deflects the radiation, but it does exist.
Do you think there's a possibility that this rollout can be stopped in some way or another?
Yeah, I'm always an optimist. I think we have seen throughout human history that sometimes just one man can do huge things. Just think about Mahatma Gandhi. Think about Martin Luther King. How he, I know someone say he's funded by this, he's funded by that. Yeah. But he did some really good stuff. After all, it's a pretty good thing that black people were starting to be treated more equal than they were before. And the segregation actually did stop and stuff. He did some really good stuff. I'm pretty sure most powers who was back then did not want that to happen. I'm sure some funded it, yes. Maybe George Soros, stuff like that, I don't know. But they didn't want that to happen. There's a reason these guys get killed, right? There's a reason JFK was killed. There's a reason Martin Luther King was killed. There's a reason even John Lennon was killed. Every time we get to these themes of stopping the internal conflicts, of loving each other and stuff like that, people tend to get killed.
What is your best advice for people when listening to all of these controversial and eye-opening things that we've been discussing today?
Never lose hope. That's the answer. To never lose hope. And one more thing, which is the key to me, is to leave the role that the media and the school systems have put you in as little me. Leave that permanently. It's a really good thing to be a humble man or woman, because if you're humble, you don't get hot-headed and travel into the situation without having a firm look at it first. You stay a little humble. I mean, you have a little distance and you look at it, and you're aware that sometimes you need to enter the situations and sometimes you don't. But humble is a really good quality, and you can change the world. You can change the world. We've seen it before, and the root cause for all of these problems we are seeing right now, everything we talked about, is compliance. It's compliance. So we have to eventually end all of this compliance bullshit, and we have to start forming strong communities, become strong in our mind, become strong in our heart, in our soul, in my belief system, become strong, connected to and with God. And other belief systems, it's another story, but I have to answer from my perspective. So that is how we do this. We allow ourselves to become strengthened, to become unified with each other, and to work together for the betterment of our situation. And never put your head down, never bow, never become a slave. Always work for freedom of expression, for the free spirit, and understand that technology can and will enslave you if you do not start to limit it in your life and become aware of its dangers.
If people want to know more about your work or read your blog or see some of your videos or just anything that has to do with what you're talking about, please tell us how people can find you.
Sure, there are 3 ways. The first is for my music, my artist page, where if you like electronic rock music and pop music, you can go to facebook.com/Johannesson DK. It's just Johannesson and then the D and the K in the end of that in one word. That's a way to find out about my music stuff and my records. The second way is my 2 YouTube channels. The one about 5G, media, mass deception and stuff is simply just called Dan Johannesson, meaning my name. And then there's the last one, which is called From New Age to Jesus Christ, and that is about spirituality. So that is the 3 ways you can look up more about all of this stuff.
It's been very interesting and exciting and fascinating to talk to you, and I want to thank you very much, Dan Johannesson, for doing this interview with Age of Truth TV. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Lucas. Thank you very much. And thank you for the wonderful work you guys do in there. It is a blessing for all of us and an inspiration. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you very much to Dan Johannesson, and thanks to all of you for watching Age of Truth TV. You can support us by clicking onto our website, ageoftruth.tv. And please subscribe to our channel, like our videos, and hit the bell for notifications. Your support is greatly appreciated. On behalf of the AOT TV team, we thank you very much for watching, and we'll see you again soon.